Hello everybody and welcome to That's Football. I'm Mark Goldbridge and we're reacting to Newcastle 4, Spurs 0, Spurs in crisis. Absolutely fantastic result for Newcastle, but I'm not surprised. I said this on the podcast, Goldbridge Saves Football, check it out, that you do not write Newcastle off at home. Regardless of injuries, they have recruited players that for 75% of the season will put a shift in. They will do it. They will fight. And that's what Eddie Howe has. Doesn't matter. When you look at that Spurs starting team in the bench, it's infinitely better than the team that Newcastle can come and put out. But the crowd's always going to back them. It's always going to be, a great atmosphere. And the players are always going to work hard. But look, Newcastle, 30% possession. 4 goals. Could have had more. Spurs, 70% possession. I can't really remember a big chance. Newcastle have sat in, defended and countered. And Spurs with that high line have been open every time Newcastle have done it. Newcastle have just had to switch on and counter. And for all the ball, Spurs have got no... It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for Spurs. And look, the league still looks good. But they're not playing a game now for 2 weeks because of the FA Cup games next week. They're going to be playing Arsenal in 2 weeks' time. And they've got a long time to think. And obviously a long time to think isn't good for Spurs. They're not in Europe. And are they too one-dimensional? Because I tell you what, Eddie Howe would go into that game this week thinking, it's a massive game. I'm going to back us to do it. But look at our injuries. Look at what they've got available. Look at where they are in the league. They're going to be well rested. They're going to be up for it. This is going to be a very, very difficult game. And Eddie Howe has sent Postecoglou back to school. He's basically done what Thomas Frank did to Ten Hag and Klopp last season at Brentford home games when they had hardly any of the ball, but they still won convincingly. He schooled him. And I wonder about how many teams are going to do that to Spurs now. Because as long as you're compact and narrow, Spurs don't really do anything because they don't have the players to do it. They don't have a Harry Kane. They don't have a Haaland or a Nunez. They don't have a physical player that can hold the ball up and link the play up. They're all technical players. Maddison, Son, Johnson, Werner, they're all, quite similar. And Newcastle just bullied them, won the ball back and countered with people like Isaac and Barnes and Gordon. And I think if they played for another 2 days, that scoreline would just go bigger. 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's worrying from Spurs because Newcastle were doing this from minute 1. And at no point has he made any change that's tactically changed the way they're going to play that game. And for Newcastle, you sort of knew at half-time that game was over. At 2-0, they looked like they were going to score again before half-time. And the pattern of the game never changed. And this is something I hear from Spurs fans, is that we're ridiculously one-dimensional. We only play one way. And if it doesn't work, look, that game's a different game if Spurs score first, because Newcastle can't sit back then. They've got to come out, and if they come out, Spurs can counter. But it's a one-dimensional way of playing. We've spoken about the high line, and that is taking nothing away from Newcastle. That is fundamentally embarrassing on Spurs' part. It's embarrassing when you're going for Champions League football and Newcastle are vulnerable. To get turned over like that is embarrassing. And for all those fans that watched it, travelled there, the players, Spurs, that is just terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And it's the second time it's happened in recent weeks. I've seen Spurs play a lot since March. Palace at home, Forest at home, Luton at home. I think they went behind to all of them and then had to rely on the home support and momentum. Fulham away, they got absolutely battered. West Ham away, again, it could have gone the other way. So, look, they're struggling. They've been struggling for weeks. What's the excuse? Are they struggling because they're bottling it, or are they struggling because teams are figuring them out? Because something's not quite right. And when you look at their next few fixtures, look, I think Villa will lose at Arsenal tomorrow, and I don't think it will make any difference to the race for top 4. But it's going to come down to 4th because very, very high chance that 5th place won't get Champions League based on what happened in Europe last week. So Tottenham's next few games, Arsenal, look, it could be the perfect game because it's a derby and you'd think people will get up for it. But Spurs have got a few hotheads. Basuma, Romero, Perro, they fly into tackles. You don't want those sort of players in a game like that sometimes. Then they've got to go to Chelsea. Then they've got to go to Liverpool. So they've got Arsenal, Chelsea away, and then Liverpool. Arsenal at home, Chelsea away, Liverpool away in their next 3 games. they could lose all 3 of them. And if they lose all 3 of them, they're in big, big trouble. Then they've got Burnley at home. Okay, that's 3 points. Then they've got Man City at home. That could be difficult. And then they've got Sheffield United away. So I can see 6 points for Spurs. Is 66 points going to be enough for them to get top 4? I would say Villa will get more than 66 points. So Spurs have got to look at themselves and they've got to turn that situation around very, very quickly. Let's take it to Newcastle, 6th in the league now. I mean, look, Eddie Howe will be looking at that tonight and going, if we hadn't have had all the injuries we've had, we'd be getting 4th this year. And I think I agree with him. I think Newcastle, like Manchester United, have had so many injuries from August to now that it's derailed any real hope of having that extra 10 points you'd think you would have. But if Newcastle can get 6th and get into the Europa League, from where their season's been, it's not where they want to be based on last year, but it's not the end of the world. And I think they're looking very, very good for that now, Newcastle. Very, very good indeed. They've scored more goals this season than Villa and Spurs. Their goal difference is actually very, very good. It's better than Spurs. So I don't know how they've managed to do that, Newcastle, by the way. I think so much of it is down to the fact that Anthony Gordon's a bloody revelation. Absolutely brilliant player, goals and assists. Isaac is fantastic as well. And I think they transitioned quickly and they've got, unlike Man United, they've got wingers that want to create. You know, Harvey Barnes has been out for most of the season, but even when it's Almiron or Murphy and certainly Gordon, they want to create. They want to create. And lo and behold, they score a lot of goals. Whereas I watch Man United, Rashford, Bruno, they want to shoot. They don't want to create. And Rasmus gets no service. So that's Newcastle's strength. They've had all the injuries, but they score goals because they're very creative. They create a lot of chances. 4-0, and I can think of another 3 they could have had. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic from Newcastle. And it's a lesson in systems. It genuinely was less than 30% possession for Newcastle, but they genuinely could have scored 6 or 7. Spurs, just for me, I don't think it's bottling because Ange is a different coach than the traditional Spurs bottling. I think it's one-dimensional. And Van der Ven's probably had his brilliant signing, worst game he's had in a Spurs shirt. So a lot's gone wrong for Spurs there. They've got to get their heads back in the game because their next 3 games, Arsenal at home, Chelsea away, Liverpool away, lose all 3 of those, I think you'll be in the Europa League, probably with Newcastle. So, yeah, they've got to turn it around. Anyway, get your comments in below. Make sure you smash a like on the video and subscribe. What are your thoughts on Spurs? Can they get top 4? Why is it all going so wrong for them as well? So many bad performances today. Son was taken off before the hour. Maddison was really, really poor. But so was many others. Get your comments in below. Thanks for watching and make sure you subscribe.